The breaking point. The last diplomat standing, Ambassador Sarah Chen, stood in the center of the Galactic Confederation's Grand Assembly, her black diplomatic uniform stark against the rainbow of alien forms surrounding her. For 23 years she had walked these marble halls, spoken these careful words, and played by their rules. Today would be different. Today the talking would finally end. The assembly hall stretched upward like a cathedral, its crystalline, walls reflecting the light of a dozen suns. Representatives from 47 species filled the curved seating tiers, their various forms creating a living tapestry of galactic civilization. At the center sat the High Arbiters, 3 ancient beings who had ruled the Confederation for over 2 centuries. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she activated the translation matrix. Every word she spoke would be heard in 47 different languages, carried to every corner of known space. The weight of her species' future pressed down on her shoulders like a physical force. High Arbiter Vexathan, a towering insectoid with compound eyes that sparkled like jewels, clicked his mandibles, in what passed for amusement among his kind. Ambassador Chen, you have requested this emergency session. The Confederation listens, though our patience grows thin with human complaints. Sarah took a deep breath. Around her, the assembled delegates shifted with boredom and irritation. The Zephyrians fluttered their wing membranes dismissively. The stone-like megalithans sat motionless, but their low rumbling indicated displeasure. The tentacled Aquarians rippled with what she had learned to recognize as contempt. Honored Arbiters, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. For 23 years humanity has abided by Confederation law. We have paid our tributes, followed your trade restrictions, and accepted your guidance in all matters of galactic commerce and expansion. A wave of chittering and growling swept through the assembly. The Scytherian delegate, a purple-skinned humanoid with 4 arms, spoke without waiting for permission. Your species has been granted the privilege of Confederation membership, despite your violent tendencies and primitive technology. You should be grateful. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she continued. During these 23 years, Confederation regulations have restricted human expansion to 12 systems. Meanwhile, our food production has been capped at levels that barely sustain our growing population. Our mining operations are limited to obsolete techniques while our people go hungry. High Arbiter Morden, a being of living crystal whose thoughts manifested as colored light patterns, pulsed with orange skepticism. Human expansion must be controlled. Your species breeds too quickly and consumes too aggressively. These measures protect the galaxy's ecological balance. Protect? Sarah's voice rose, echoing off the crystal walls. Our children are starving on Terra Nova because we're forbidden to use advanced farming techniques. Our colonies on Kepler's edge are mining with stone tools because we're not allowed disruptive technologies. Meanwhile, every other species enjoys unlimited expansion and the latest innovations. The Vorthan delegate, a gas-based life form contained within a mechanical suit, spoke in electronic tones. Lesser species require guidance. The Confederation has maintained peace for 3 centuries by ensuring proper hierarchy. Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. Lesser species. After decades of diplomacy, that's how they still saw humanity. She had dedicated her life to proving human worth through words and negotiation. Her children had grown up in embassy halls, learning alien languages and customs. Her husband had died waiting for Confederation medical technology that was deemed too advanced for human use. I came here today to make one final request, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. Lift the expansion restrictions. Allow us to feed our people. Grant us the same rights as every other Confederation member. High Arbiter Zil-Oth, a serpentine being whose scales shifted color with emotion, coiled upward with scales flashing, red with anger. You forget your place, human. The Confederation has been generous beyond measure. Your primitive species should be grateful for any consideration at all. The assembly erupted in agreement. Delegates clicked, chirped, and roared their approval. Sarah stood in the center of it all, feeling the weight of history settling around her like a shroud. She thought of her granddaughter back on Earth, born, into a world where humanity begged for scraps from beings who would never see them as equals. "Then you refuse?" Sarah asked quietly, her words somehow cutting through the chaos. "We refuse to enable your species' destructive tendencies," Vexthon declared. "In fact, new restrictions are being implemented. Human expansion is hereby limited to your current 12 systems. No new colonies. No new mining operations. Your tribute payments will increase by 30% to fund ecological restoration projects." The silence that followed was absolute. Sarah felt something break inside her chest, something that had held her together through decades of humiliation and condescension. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Harder. Colder. "I see." Sarah reached into her diplomatic pouch and withdrew a small silver device. "Then I am authorized to deliver humanity's response." She activated the device. A holographic projection filled the center of the chamber, showing the familiar blue marble of Earth. But surrounding the planet was something that made the assembled delegates shift uneasily. Ships. Thousands of them. Sleek, angular vessels that looked nothing like the gentle exploration craft humanity had previously displayed. "What is the meaning of this?" Zeloth hissed, scales flashing alarm colors. Sarah smiled, and for the first time in 23 years, it wasn't diplomatic. "While I've been here talking, my people have been building. You see, we learned something interesting about your primitive technology restrictions. They only apply to technologies you know about." The hologram shifted, showing massive shipyards hidden in asteroid belts, underground facilities on airless moons, and research stations in the void between stars. Humans in environment suits worked alongside robotic systems, constructing vessels that gleamed with unknown purpose. For 15 years, humanity's best minds have been developing what we call the Deep Strike Fleet. Sarah continued. "We learned from you. Every species you've conquered, every world you've strip-mined, every civilization you've ground under your boot. We studied your weaknesses." The assembly exploded into chaos. Delegates screeched and roared, demanding explanations. Security forces began moving toward the chamber floor. Sarah stood calmly in the center of it all, 23 years of suppressed anger finally finding its voice. "The Terran Republic formally withdraws from the Galactic Confederation," Sarah announced, her words cutting through the pandemonium. "Furthermore, we declare our intention to liberate all species suffering under Confederation oppression." High Arbiter Vexthon's compound eyes blazed with fury. "You dare threaten the Confederation? Your pathetic fleet would be destroyed within hours." Sarah's smile widened. "You're thinking like the old humanity, the one that begged for scraps and accepted insults. But we're not that species anymore." The hologram shifted again, showing detailed schematics of Confederation ships, their weaknesses highlighted in red. "We know every design flaw in your vessels, every blind spot in your sensors, every weakness in your shields. We've been preparing for this war for 15 years. The megalithan delegate's stone form cracked with stress fractures. "This is madness. The Confederation has protected the galaxy for centuries." "Protected?" Sarah laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Tell that to the Altarians extinct because they refused to pay tribute. Tell that to the Centauri colonies, enslaved in your mining operations. Tell that to my husband, who died because you deemed human lives unworthy of advanced medical care." She turned slowly, addressing the entire assembly. "For too long, you've mistaken our patience for weakness, our diplomacy for cowardice. Today, you learn the difference between humanity at peace and humanity at war." The chamber's defensive shields began activating, but Sarah was already moving toward the exit. Her security detail, humans who had played the role of harmless guards for decades, suddenly moved with military precision. Hidden weapons appeared in their hands as they formed a protective formation around their ambassador. "Stop her!" Zeloth screamed, but the human security team's movements were too fast, too coordinated. They had been soldiers pretending to be diplomats, just as Sarah had been a war planner pretending to be a peacekeeper. As they reached the chamber doors, Sarah turned back one final time. "You wanted to keep us primitive and contained. Instead, you gave us time to prepare and a reason to fight. In your arrogance, you've created the very enemy you feared. The doors sealed behind them with a finality that echoed through the chamber. The assembled delegates sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. Then, as the implications began to sink in, panic erupted. The galaxy burns. Within hours of Sarah Chen's departure, every communication network in Confederation space carried the same message. Humanity had withdrawn from the Galactic Confederation and declared war on the Galactic Order itself. The news hit different species in different ways, but the result was universal chaos. On the Confederation capital world of Nexus Prime, emergency sessions convened in every government building. Military commanders who had grown soft during centuries of peace suddenly found themselves planning for a war they didn't understand, against an enemy they had underestimated. Admiral Kethvar of the Confederation fleet stood before a holographic display showing human territories. His scaled face, marked with the scars of ancient battles, showed the confusion shared by military leaders across the galaxy. How did we miss this? Our intelligence networks reported no significant military buildup. His aide, a young Zephyrian named Siltha, fluttered her wings nervously. Sir, it appears the humans have been using their mining operations as cover. Every asteroid processing facility was actually a shipyard. Every scientific research station was producing weapons. The implications staggered the assembled officers. For 15 years, humanity had been playing a game of deception that put their diplomatic efforts to shame. While Earth's ambassadors spoke of peace and cooperation, human engineers had been preparing for total war. Their fleet composition? Kethvar demanded. Unknown, sir. They've somehow blocked all our surveillance attempts. What intelligence we have suggests vessels unlike anything in Confederation databases. New designs, new technologies, new tactical doctrines. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on countless worlds. The Aquarian Deep Council called emergency sessions in their underwater cities. The Skylord Assembly of the Vorthan Collective gathered in their orbital habitats. The Great Stone Parliament of the Megalithans convened for the first time in 50 years. But it was among the oppressed species that humanity's declaration had the most profound impact. On the slave worlds, in the tribute systems, among the conquered peoples, whispers began to spread. Humanity had stood up to the Confederation. Someone was finally fighting back. The Alterran survivors, driven to the edge of extinction, gathered in hidden shelters and dared to hope. The Tau Ceti colonists, forced to mine rare minerals for Confederation use, looked to the stars and wondered if freedom might finally be possible. Even among the Confederation's member species, questions began to arise about the nature of their galactic civilization. On Earth, the transformation was visible from orbit. Cities that had seemed peaceful and pastoral now revealed their true nature. Hidden factories emerged from underground facilities. Camouflaged military bases shed their civilian disguises. The planet that had seemed to accept its limited role in galactic affairs revealed itself as a fortress world prepared for total war. President Maria Santos stood in the underground command center beneath New Geneva, watching as reports flooded in from across human space. Her silver hair was pulled back severely, and her dark eyes showed the weight of a decision 23 years in the making. Fleet status? She asked her military commander, General Marcus Webb, a man whose quiet demeanor had fooled Confederation observers for years, smiled grimly. All battle groups report ready. The Deep Strike Fleet is fully operational. Our allies among the oppressed species are beginning to mobilize. Allies? Santos raised an eyebrow. We haven't been the only ones preparing, Madam President. The Alterrans have been building hidden fleets. The Tau Cetians have been developing new weapons. The Rigelians have been training resistance fighters. They were all waiting for someone to make the first move. The magnitude of the conspiracy began to dawn on Santos. Humanity hadn't just been preparing for war. They had been building a coalition of the oppressed, the exploited, and the forgotten. While the Confederation believed they ruled through fear and superior force, their victims had been planning and preparing. Time to target? Santos asked. 6 hours to the First Confederation. Stronghold, Admiral Chen leads the advance force. Santos nodded. Admiral Robert Chen, Sarah's younger brother, had spent his career commanding civilian transport vessels that were actually disguised warships. Like his sister, he had played his role perfectly, hiding humanity's true capabilities until the moment they could be revealed. The communication board lit up with incoming messages from Confederation territory, demands for explanation, threats of retaliation, offers of negotiation. Santos ignored them all. The time for talking had ended with her ambassador's final speech. "Send a message to all human colonies," Santos ordered. "Operation Thunderbolt is now active. Show them what we really are." Across 12 star systems, the facade fell away. Human colonies revealed defensive installations that could repel entire fleets. Mining operations unveiled weapons production facilities that had been disguised for decades. Research stations activated shield generators and weapon systems that used technology the Confederation had never seen. The trap was sprung, and humanity stood revealed not as the primitive species seeking guidance, but as a civilization that had used peace as camouflage for the greatest military buildup in galactic history. As the first human warships jumped to hyperspace, carrying death to Confederation strongholds, one thought echoed across the galaxy. The age of words had ended, and the age of war had begun. When diplomats become warriors, the masquerade ends. The transformation of human space was visible even to long-range Confederation sensors. Within hours of Ambassador Sarah Chen's declaration, every human world shed its peaceful facade like a snake, shedding skin. What the galaxy had seen as primitive colonies and struggling settlements revealed themselves as fortress worlds bristling with advanced weaponry. Admiral Robert Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiance, humanity's first true warship, to be revealed to alien eyes. For 20 years, he had commanded cargo vessels and exploration ships while secretly overseeing the construction of humanity's hidden fleet. The bridge around him hummed with barely contained energy, every surface displaying tactical information that would have been impossible with approved Confederation technology. "Jump complete, Admiral," reported Commander Lisa Zhang, his tactical officer. Like every human military officer, she had spent years disguised as a civilian administrator or merchant captain. "All battle groups report ready. Confederation monitoring. Station Omega-7 is directly ahead." Robert studied the tactical display with eyes that had pretended to be those of a simple freight captain. The monitoring station was a massive structure, bristling with sensors and communication arrays that had watched human space for decades, reporting every movement back to the Confederation capital. It was also completely defenseless, protected only by the assumption that no one would dare attack it. "Open a channel," Robert commanded. The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the monitoring station's command center. Commander Threxel, a Vorthan in his mechanical atmospheric suit, stared at the human fleet with what could only be described as shock. Behind him, technicians of various species scrambled at their stations, trying to understand how such a massive fleet had appeared without warning. "This is Admiral Robert Chen of the Terran Republic Navy," Robert announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who no longer needed to pretend. "You have exactly 10 minutes to evacuate your station before we destroy it." Threxel's electronic voice crackled with disbelief. "Admiral, the humans have no naval rank structure. You are designated as Merchant Captain Classification 7. Robert smiled, the expression devoid of warmth. "We've been designated as many things by the Confederation, Commander. All of them lies. You have 9 minutes and 30 seconds. The monitoring station erupted into chaos as the reality of humanity's deception began to sink in. For decades, every human they had observed, cataloged, and dismissed had been playing a role. Every cargo ship had been a potential warship. Every mining operation had been a weapons facility. Every peaceful colony had been a military base. "Admiral," Threxel said, his electronic voice modulator failing to hide his desperation, "the Confederation will respond with overwhelming force. Your species will be extinct within weeks." "The Confederation has been trying to make us extinct for 20 years, Robert replied coldly. "Starvation, disease, technological suppression. The only difference now is that we're fighting back openly. 8 minutes. As evacuation pods began launching from the monitoring station, similar scenes played out across Confederation space. Human merchant vessels revealed weapons systems that defied known technology. Research stations activated shield generators that could deflect battleship weapons. Mining facilities launched fighter squadrons that moved with precision no civilian pilot could achieve. The Confederation's first response was predictable. Admiral Kethvar's battle group, the pride of the Confederation fleet, jumped into the Kepler system expecting to find a primitive human colony ripe for punishment. Instead, they found a fortress world whose agricultural domes suddenly bristled with planetary defense cannons. The Battle of Kepler's Edge would be remembered as the moment the galaxy realized humanity had been preparing for this war far longer than anyone imagined. What should have been a simple punitive raid became a massacre, as Confederation ships designed for show as much as function met human vessels built for one purpose: killing. The art of war revealed. The first battle reports reached the Confederation capital within hours, and they read like fiction. An entire Confederation battle group destroyed. A fortress world that appeared overnight. Human tactics that seemed to anticipate every Confederation move before it was made. High Arbiter Vexthon stood in the emergency session chamber, his compound eyes reflecting the holographic displays showing the destruction. Around him, the surviving members of the High Council struggled to process information that challenged everything they believed about galactic order. Impossible, muttered High Arbiter Zealoth, her scales shifting through colors of confusion and fear. Our intelligence networks reported no military buildup. Our observers cataloged every human facility. Our observers saw what the humans wanted them to see, replied a new voice. Ambassador Sarah Chen walked into the chamber, flanked by armed human soldiers, her diplomatic immunity the only thing preventing her immediate arrest. Everything you knew about humanity was a carefully constructed lie. The assembled arbiters recoiled as if struck. Vexthon's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. You cannot be here. Earth is under blockade. Sarah smiled, producing a small device from her diplomatic pouch. Your blockade fleet was destroyed 6 hours ago. Admiral Reyes sends his regards. She activated the device, showing holographic footage of Confederation dreadnought exploding in brilliant flashes of light. The tactical analysis was devastating. Human ships moved with coordination that suggested either perfect communication or shared artificial intelligence. Their weapons punched through Confederation shields as if they didn't exist. Their own defenses seemed to absorb energy weapons that should have vaporized entire hulls. 23 years, Sarah continued, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. 23 years of your observers watching us, reporting on our primitive activities, while we learned everything about you. Your ship designs, your tactical doctrines, your political structures, your psychological profiles. We studied you like scientists studying insects. High Arbiter Mordun's crystalline form pulsed with angry red light. You cannot hope to match the combined might of 47 species. 47 species? Sarah laughed. Look at your intelligence reports more carefully. The Alterans have declared independence and joined our alliance. The Taucetians have seized their mining worlds. The Rigelians have destroyed their tribute collection centers. Your empire is fracturing as we speak. The reports flooding into the chamber confirmed her words. Across Confederation space, oppressed species were rising in rebellion, but these weren't desperate uprisings doomed to failure. They were coordinated military operations using weapons and tactics that bore suspicious resemblance to human designs. You've been arming them, Vexthon accused. We've been liberating them, Sarah corrected. Every species you've ground under your heel, every world you've stripped of resources, every people you've declared primitive or lesser, they've all been waiting for someone to show them that the Confederation could bleed. The true scope of humanity's conspiracy began to emerge through the intelligence reports. For 15 years, human trade missions had been secret diplomatic contacts with oppressed species. Human research expeditions had been covert military, advisors teaching guerrilla tactics. Human mining operations had been weapons manufactories supplying resistance movements across the galaxy. This is an act of galactic terrorism, Ziloth hissed. "This is revolution," Sarah replied. "And you created it. Every child you let starve, every world you bled dry, every species you declared inferior. You built the coalition that's now tearing your empire apart." The Predator revealed. The Battle of Nexus Prime began at dawn on the Confederation capital world. What should have been humanity's ultimate defeat became instead a demonstration of just how thoroughly they had outmaneuvered their former masters. The Confederation's home fleet, the most powerful naval force in known space, found itself facing an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. Admiral Kethvar commanded from the Bridge of the Eternal Glory, a massive dreadnought that had never known defeat. Around him, the greatest military minds in Confederation space struggled to understand how their opponents seemed to know their battle plans before they made them. "Human fleet composition?" Kethvar demanded. "Impossible to determine, sir," replied his intelligence officer. "Their ships are using some form of adaptive camouflage. Our sensors show different configurations every time we scan them." The first human attack came not from space, but from within the Confederation fleet itself. Ships that had been identified as Allied vessels suddenly revealed their true nature, opening fire on their unsuspecting neighbors. The humans had infiltrated the very heart of Confederation power, disguising their warships as Allied vessels from sympathetic species. "How many of our allies have betrayed us?" Kethvar whispered. The answer came in the form of devastating weapons fire from ships bearing the insignia of the Alteran Resistance, the Free Tau Ceti Republic, and a dozen other movements that had supposedly been crushed decades ago. The oppressed species hadn't been destroyed. They had been hiding, growing stronger, waiting for their moment. Admiral Robert Chen watched the battle unfold from the Bridge of the Defiance, his tactical display showing the systematic destruction of Confederation forces. Beside him, Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Alteran fleet coordinated the combined rebel forces with efficiency born of years of secret planning. "Phase 1 complete," reported Commander Zhang. "Confederation defense grid is down. Inner system defenses are compromised. Begin Phase 2, Robert ordered. "Let them see what we've really been building." The human fleet that had seemed impressive suddenly doubled in size as cloaked vessels revealed themselves. But these weren't just ships. They were mobile fortresses, massive constructions that dwarfed even Confederation dreadnoughts. Each one carried enough firepower to level a planet, protected by shields that seemed to bend the laws of physics. On Nexus Prime below, panic spread through the government districts as the reality of their situation became clear. The species they had dismissed as primitive had not only matched their technology, but surpassed it. The beings they had treated as inferiors had been manipulating them for decades. President Maria Santos appeared on every communication channel across Confederation space, her image broadcast from the bridge of humanity's flagship. She wore not the simple clothes of a colonial administrator, but the uniform of a military leader who had been preparing for this moment her entire career. "Citizens of the former Confederation," she began, her voice carrying across star systems. "Your leaders told you that humanity needed guidance, that we were too primitive for self-governance, too dangerous for advanced technology. They were wrong about our primitiveness. They were right about our danger." The broadcast continued, showing footage of human fleets devastating Confederation strongholds, rebel species rising across the galaxy, and worlds declaring independence from the corrupt system that had oppressed them for centuries. "The age of the Confederation is over," Santos declared. "What comes next depends on you. Join us in building a galaxy based on cooperation rather than domination, or stand with your oppressors and share their fate." As human ships took control of Nexus Prime's orbital space, the galaxy's power structure crumbled in real time. Species that had been allies for centuries turned on each other as old grievances surfaced. Worlds that had seemed loyal declared independence. The great galactic civilization that had ruled through fear and superior technology discovered that their subjects had been preparing for this moment far longer than anyone had imagined. In the end, the Confederation's greatest mistake hadn't been underestimating humanity's military capabilities. It had been failing to understand that by oppressing so many species for so long, They had given their victims both the motivation and the time to prepare for revolution. The galaxy would never be the same. The age of diplomacy and careful words had ended. The age of freedom and blood had begun, and at its heart stood humanity, no longer the primitive species begging for acceptance, but the architects of galactic revolution who had played the longest, most dangerous game in the history of known space. The Confederation had wanted to keep humanity contained and controlled. Instead, they had created the very force that would bring their empire to its knees.